The gunshot echoed across the dusty main street of Nebraska City, Nebraska, sending a flock of startled birds into the cloudless summer sky of 1878. Sophia Grayson pressed her back against the weathered clapboard of Hanson's General Store, her heart hammering in her chest as she clutched her worn leather satchel tighter. She hadn't come all this way to die on her first day in town. The distinctive drag of her right foot scraped against the wooden boardwalk as she cautiously peered around the corner to see what the commotion was about. "Just a warning shot, Miller," a deep voice called out. "Next one won't be aimed at the sky." Sophia exhaled slowly. Just another disagreement between the local men, something she'd been warned about before boarding the stagecoach in St. Louis. At 22, she'd faced far worse threats than the occasional gunfire of frontier justice. After all, she hadn't traveled nearly 1,000 miles to be deterred by the first sign of trouble. Gathering her courage, Sophia stepped back onto the busy thoroughfare, grimacing slightly as her damaged leg protested the sudden movement. The injury, a permanent reminder of the fever that had nearly claimed her life 3 years ago, made each step a deliberate affair. In St. Louis, people had at least pretended not to notice. Here in Nebraska City, strangers openly stared at her uneven gait. "You need some help with that, miss." A boy of about 12 gestured toward her bag. "Thank you, but I can manage." Sophia offered him a gentle smile, determined to maintain her independence. The boy shrugged and scampered away, leaving Sophia to navigate the busy street alone. She'd come to Nebraska City with a teaching position secured at the local schoolhouse, a fresh start away from the pitying glances of her family and the whispered conversations that stopped whenever she entered a room. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a modest white building with a small bell tower. Inside, Sophia found Mr. Peterson, the town council chairman, waiting for her with a ring of keys and a ledger book. "Miss Grayson, welcome to Nebraska City." The balding man adjusted his spectacles. "I trust your journey was uneventful as one might hope for, Mr. Peterson." Sophia set her satchel down and straightened her simple blue traveling dress. "I'm eager to see the schoolhouse and begin preparations for the term." Mr. Peterson nodded approvingly, then his gaze drifted to her leg. He quickly looked away, but Sophia had caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes. She'd seen that look countless times before. "The children here are a spirited bunch," he said carefully. "I do hope you'll be able to manage them appropriately." Sophia stiffened. "I assure you, Mr. Peterson, my ability to teach isn't hindered by my limp. The children will be in capable hands." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Of course. Now let me show you to your accommodations. Mrs. Wilkins has prepared a room for you above the millinery shop. It's modest but comfortable for a single lady." Sophia followed Mr. Peterson down the street, acutely aware of the curious glances from townsfolk going about their business. A group of women outside the millinery shop fell silent as they approached, their expressions ranging from curiosity to undisguised judgment. "Our new school teacher, ladies," Mr. Peterson announced with forced enthusiasm. "Miss Sophia Grayson from St. Louis." The women offered polite nods, but Sophia could read the skepticism in their eyes. One leaned toward another, whispering something that made both of them glance at Sophia's leg and share a knowing look. "Mrs. Wilkins will show you to your room," Mr. Peterson said, clearly eager to complete his duty. "School begins Monday next. That should give you time to settle in." Left alone with Mrs. Wilkins, a stern-faced woman with iron-gray hair pulled into a tight bun, Sophia braced herself for more scrutiny. "It's up these stairs," Mrs. Wilkins said, gesturing to a narrow staircase at the back of the shop. "Will you be needing assistance?" Her eyes flicked meaningfully to Sophia's leg. "No, thank you," Sophia replied firmly. "I'm quite capable of managing stairs." Mrs. Wilkins pursed her lips. "As you wish. Breakfast is at 6 sharp. I don't hold with tardiness." The room was indeed modest, a narrow bed, a small writing desk, a washstand, and a wardrobe that had seen better days. But the window overlooked the main street, and in the distance, Sophia could see the rolling hills beyond the town. It wasn't much, but it was hers, a place to begin anew. After unpacking her few belongings, Sophia decided to venture out to explore the town that would be her home for the foreseeable future. She had just reached the bottom of the stairs when she heard voices from the shop. "Did you see her leg?" One of the women from earlier was speaking to Mrs. Wilkins. "How does the council expect her to control a classroom of children when she can barely walk properly herself?" "She'll last a month, mark my words," another replied. "Those Wilcox boys alone will run circles around her. It's a shame they couldn't find someone more suitable." Sophia's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she lifted her chin and pushed open the door, causing both women to jump guiltily. "Good afternoon, ladies," she said with a forced smile. "I thought I'd explore the town a bit before dinner. Perhaps you could recommend places of interest." The women exchanged uncomfortable glances before the older one spoke. "The Mercantile has some new fabrics in from back east, and Dawson serves a decent meal if you're not inclined to cook." "Thank you." Sophia stepped past them, pretending not to notice the way they stared after her as she made her uneven way down the boardwalk. The Mercantile was her first stop. Sophia needed supplies for the schoolhouse: chalk, paper, and a few books to supplement the sparse collection Mr. Peterson had shown her. The shopkeeper, a heavy-set man with impressive mutton chops, watched her with undisguised curiosity as she selected her items. "You're the new schoolteacher," he stated rather than asked. "Heard you came all the way from St. Louis." "That's right, Mr. Townsend, Henry Townsend. My boy Will is 11, he'll be in your class." The man leaned on the counter. "Got a bit of a wild streak in him, but he's sharp as a tack. I look forward to meeting him." Sophia counted out coins for her purchases. "I believe all children have potential waiting to be nurtured." Mr. Townsend nodded slowly. "That's a fine sentiment, Miss Grayson. Though I reckon some of our local boys might test that theory." His gaze, like everyone else's, drifted to her leg. "Town can be rough sometimes, especially for folks who ain't, well, who might find it hard to get around quick like." Sophia had heard enough. "Mr. Townsend, I assure you that while my leg may not move as swiftly as others, my mind certainly does. Your son and his classmates will discover that soon enough." She gathered her purchases and turned to leave, nearly colliding with a tall figure blocking the doorway. Sophia stumbled slightly, and a strong hand caught her elbow to steady her. "Careful there, madam." Sophia looked up into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a man in his late 20s, his face tanned and weathered beneath the brim of a dust-covered Stetson. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest that had seen its fair share of hard living. "Thank you," Sophia murmured, regaining her balance and her composure. "I wasn't looking where I was going." The stranger's gaze held hers for a moment longer than propriety dictated before he released her arm and stepped aside. "No harm done." "Xavier," Mr. Townsend called from behind the counter. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon. Thought you were driving cattle up to Omaha." "Got done early," the man Xavier replied, finally breaking his gaze from Sophia's. "Price was better than expected, so the boss decided to sell the whole herd." Mr. Townsend turned to Sophia. "Miss Grayson, meet Xavier Oakley, best ranch foreman in the territory." "Xavier, this is Miss Sophia Grayson, our new schoolteacher." Xavier Oakley tipped his hat. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Grayson. Nebraska City's lucky to have a new teacher. Last one lit out for California after just one winter here." "I'm made of sterner stuff than appearances might suggest, Mr. Oakley," Sophia replied with a small smile. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have more errands to attend to." As she stepped onto the boardwalk, Sophia heard someone call her name. Turning, she saw a group of young men lounging outside the saloon across the street. One of them, a lanky youth with a wispy attempt at a mustache, nudged his companions and pointed at her. "Hey, school teacher," he called. "You gonna teach our little brothers and sisters how to walk funny too?" His companions burst into raucous laughter, drawing the attention of other passers-by. Sophia felt her face burn with embarrassment and anger. She was about to turn away when Xavier Oakley stepped past her, his expression hard as flint. "Shut your mouth, Parker," he said, his voice low but carrying clearly across the street. "Miss Grayson's done more traveling to get here than you've done in your worthless life." The young man Parker straightened, his amusement fading. "Just having a bit of fun, Oakley. No need to get all riled up over a gimp." What happened next occurred so swiftly that Sophia barely had time to register it. Xavier crossed the street in 5 long strides, grabbed Parker by his shirt front, and lifted him almost off his feet. "That woman walked through more than you ever will, boy," Xavier said, his voice deadly quiet. "Show some respect or I'll teach you some manners myself." Parker's friends backed away, suddenly finding great interest in their boots or the distant hills. Xavier released the young man with a slight shove and turned back toward Sophia, who stood frozen on the boardwalk. "My apologies for the disturbance, Miss Grayson," he said as he rejoined her. "Some folks around here need reminding of their manners." "I thank you, Mr. Oakley, but I'm accustomed to such comments." Sophia clutched her purchases tighter. "I don't require a defender." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Never thought you did." "But every newcomer deserves a proper welcome to Nebraska City, not the likes of Billy Parker's foolishness." They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Xavier spoke again. "May I escort you to your next errand? Town can be confusing for newcomers." Sophia hesitated. She'd sworn to herself that she would be independent here, but there was something disarming about Xavier Oakley's straightforward manner. "I was heading to the schoolhouse to drop off these supplies," she said finally. "If it's not out of your way." "Not at all." Xavier fell into step beside her, deliberately matching his pace to her slower one. "Been meaning to fix that loose board on the schoolhouse steps anyway. Mr. Peterson's been putting it off for months." As they walked, Sophia found herself studying Xavier from the corner of her eye. Unlike the others she'd met today, he looked directly at her when speaking, his gaze meeting hers rather than drifting to her leg. It was refreshing. "Mr. Townsend mentioned you're a ranch foreman," she said, breaking the silence. "Which ranch, if I may ask?" "Silver Creek. About 10 miles east of town. We run about 2,000 head of cattle and some horses." There was unmistakable pride in his voice. "Been there 8 years now." "Is that what brought you to Nebraska?" Xavier's expression shifted slightly. "Something like that." "Came west after the war, looking for open spaces. Found more than I bargained for." "The war." Sophia did the calculation quickly. He would have been very young during the conflict that had torn the nation apart. Too young to have fought, surely. But then again, many boys had lied about their age to enlist. "And you, Miss Grayson, what brings a lady from St. Louis all the way to our dusty little corner of Nebraska?" Sophia considered how much to reveal. "A teaching position, an opportunity for independence." "And your family was agreeable to you coming all this way alone?" "My parents passed away when I was 16. I lived with my aunt until recently, but—" Sophia paused, memories of her aunt's well-meaning but suffocating concern flooding back. It was time for a change. They reached the schoolhouse, and Xavier immediately knelt to examine the loose board on the steps. "This won't take more than a few minutes to fix. Got some tools at the livery I can borrow. Please don't trouble yourself on my account, Mr. Oakley." He looked up at her, squinting against the afternoon sun. "No trouble. Wouldn't want any of your students taking a tumble their first day." Before she could protest further, he was striding toward the livery stable. Sophia unlocked the schoolhouse door and went inside, setting her purchases on the teacher's desk. The single room was dusty but had good light from its many windows. Rows of simple wooden desks faced the front, and a small pot-bellied stove stood in the corner for the winter months. Sophia moved around the room, planning where to hang maps and arrange books. This would be her domain, the one place in town where her authority wouldn't be questioned. At least, that was her hope. She was writing a list of needed supplies when Xavier returned with a hammer and some nails. Through the window, she watched him kneel on the steps and begin working, his movements efficient and precise. A few minutes later, he appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. "Steps fixed, Miss Grayson. Checked the others while I was at it. They're solid enough." "That's very kind of you, Mr. Oakley. I appreciate the assistance." He nodded, then glanced around the schoolroom. "Place could use a fresh coat of whitewash before the term starts. I could arrange for that if you'd like." Sophia was touched by the offer but shook her head. "I wouldn't want to impose further. You've already been more than helpful. It's no imposition. Got some ranch hands who could use the extra work on their day off." He hesitated. "Town hasn't always been welcoming to newcomers. Least I can do is make sure you've got a proper classroom." There was something in his expression, a sincerity that contrasted sharply with the skepticism Sophia had encountered from others in town. Before she could respond, the schoolhouse door opened again, and Mr. Peterson stepped inside. "Miss Grayson, I see you've Oakley. Didn't expect to find you here." The council chairman's surprise was evident, as was a certain wariness in his tone. "Just fixing that loose step you've been talking about since winter, Peterson." Xavier replaced his hat. "Miss Grayson was kind enough to let me assist." Mr. Peterson looked between them, his expression unreadable. "How community-minded of you, Oakley. Miss Grayson, I've brought the student roster for you to review before Monday." "Thank you, Mr. Peterson." Sophia accepted the papers, aware of the sudden tension in the room. Mr. Oakley was just offering to have some men whitewash the classroom before term begins. Was he now? Peterson's tone suggested this was unexpected. The council had planned to handle that next spring. "The children deserve a clean classroom now, not next spring," Xavier said evenly. "No cost to the council. My men need the work." The two men stared at each other for a long moment before Peterson shrugged. "As you wish. Just make sure it's done by Sunday evening. Miss Grayson needs time to prepare on Monday morning." Xavier nodded curtly. "It'll be done." "Miss Grayson, I'll take my leave now. Welcome to Nebraska City." With that, he departed, leaving Sophia alone with the clearly discomfited Mr. Peterson. "Miss Grayson," Peterson began, his voice lowered, "while I appreciate your eagerness to improve the schoolhouse, I feel compelled to offer some advice. Xavier Oakley has a complicated reputation in town. You might want to exercise caution in your dealings with him." Sophia straightened her shoulders. "Mr. Oakley has shown me nothing but courtesy and respect, which is more than I can say for some others I've encountered today." Peterson sighed. "I understand. It's just that a schoolteacher's reputation is as important as her abilities." "Small towns talk, Miss Grayson." "Then let them talk about my teaching, Mr. Peterson, not with whom I associate." Sophia met his gaze steadily. "Now, shall we discuss the student roster? the weekend passed in a flurry of preparation. True to Xavier's word, a crew of ranch hands arrived early Saturday morning to whitewash the schoolhouse. They worked efficiently under the supervision of a stocky, middle-aged man who introduced himself as Hank, Silver Creek's ranch cook. Xavier himself was conspicuously absent, which Sophia found both disappointing and relieving after Mr. Peterson's warning. By Sunday evening, the schoolhouse gleamed with fresh paint inside and out. The floors had been swept, the windows washed, and someone had even repaired the crooked blackboard. Sophia stood in the doorway, admiring the transformation, when a voice spoke from behind her. "Does it meet with your approval, Miss Grayson?" She turned to find Xavier Oakley leaning against the hitching post, his horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding, standing patiently nearby. "It's wonderful, Mr. Oakley. Please convey my deepest gratitude to your men. They've done excellent work." He approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "They were happy to help. Hank says you brought them lemonade and cookies yesterday," Sophia smiled. "It seemed the least I could do. They worked so hard in this heat. Small kindnesses mean a lot out here." Xavier glanced at the schoolhouse. "You all set for tomorrow, as ready as I'll ever be." 28 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. "It will be challenging. You'll manage just fine." His confidence was flattering, especially given how little he knew about her. "And how can you be so certain, Mr. Oakley? You hardly know me." A slow smile spread across his face, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his weathered features, softening the hard lines around his eyes. "I'm a fair judge of character, Miss Grayson, and I've never met anyone who traveled so far alone, especially with—" He stopped abruptly. "With a limp," Sophia finished for him. "You can say it, Mr. Oakley. I'm well aware of my condition." Xavier studied her for a moment. "May I ask what happened, if it's not too forward?" No one in Nebraska City had directly asked her that question yet, though she'd caught plenty of speculative glances. "Typhoid fever, 3 years ago. The infection settled in my hip and leg. I was fortunate to survive, but the damage was permanent." "I'm sorry," he said simply, without the pity she'd grown to detest. "Don't be. As you so eloquently told that young man, I've walked through quite a lot. It's made me stronger in ways that matter." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. Then Xavier cleared his throat and looked away. "I should be getting back to the ranch. Cattle don't feed themselves." He mounted his horse with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. "Good luck tomorrow, Miss Grayson. Those kids don't know it yet, but they're mighty fortunate to have you." Sophia watched him ride away, a strange mixture of emotions stirring within her. There was something about Xavier Oakley that intrigued her, despite her determination to focus solely on establishing herself as Nebraska City's schoolteacher. Perhaps it was his straightforward manner, or the way he looked at her as a person rather than a curiosity. Whatever it was, Sophia pushed it firmly from her mind as she locked the schoolhouse and headed back to her room above the millinery. Tomorrow would be her first true test in this new place, the day she would either begin to earn the town's respect or confirm their doubts about the limping schoolteacher from St. Louis. Monday dawned clear and crisp, with a hint of autumn in the air despite it being only late August. Sophia dressed with particular care in her best navy blue dress with its modest white collar. She pinned her chestnut hair into a neat bun, practiced her most authoritative expression in the small mirror, and set off for the schoolhouse an hour before the children were due to arrive. To her surprise, a small crowd of parents had already gathered outside, clearly intent on witnessing the new teacher's first day. Sophia squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and approached with as dignified a walk as her leg allowed. "Good morning," she greeted them with a confident smile. "I'm Miss Grayson. I look forward to meeting your children today." Some nodded politely while others merely stared. One woman stepped forward, a tall, handsome matron with silver threading through her dark hair. "I'm Margaret Townsend, Henry's wife. Our Will is quite excited about the new term." She offered her hand, which Sophia gratefully shook. "We're all curious to learn more about you, Miss Grayson. Perhaps you might join us for the church social this Sunday." "That's very kind, Mrs. Townsend. I'd be delighted." The ice broken, a few more parents introduced themselves. Not all were welcoming. Sophia noticed several mothers exchanging dubious glances when they thought she wasn't looking, but it was a start. At precisely 8 o'clock, Sophia rang the school bell. Children emerged from every direction, some running eagerly, others dragging their feet. They filed into the schoolhouse, their curious eyes taking in their new teacher with expressions ranging from shy interest to open skepticism. "Good morning, children," Sophia said once they were seated. "I'm Miss Grayson, and I'm very pleased to be your new teacher." A boy in the back row, one of the older students, raised his hand. "Miss Grayson, Billy Parker says you got a gimpy leg 'cause you got kicked by a mule. That true?" A ripple of nervous giggles swept through the classroom. Sophia identified the speaker as James Wilcox, one of the troublemakers Mr. Peterson had warned her about. Instead of showing anger, she smiled serenely. "An interesting theory, Mr. Wilcox, though incorrect. I survived typhoid fever, which damaged my leg. Now, since you're clearly interested in medical matters, perhaps you'd like to read from our science text about how diseases affect the human body. Page 27, if you please." The boy flushed, caught off guard by her calm response and the assignment. As he fumbled with his book, Sophia continued, "In this classroom, we will learn many things: reading, writing, arithmetic, science, and history. But perhaps the most important lesson is respect for ourselves and others. Does anyone know what respect means?" A small girl in the front row tentatively raised her hand. "It means being nice." "That's part of it, yes. Respect means recognizing the worth and dignity of every person, regardless of their appearance or abilities." Sophia moved along the rows, making eye contact with each student. "In this classroom, everyone deserves respect, including your fellow students, regardless of their age, background, or physical differences." By lunchtime, Sophia had assessed her students' varied abilities and begun dividing them into appropriate learning groups. The younger children seemed to accept her authority readily enough, while some of the older boys, James Wilcox and his friends in particular, maintained an air of barely concealed insolence. As the children ate their lunch outside in the schoolyard, Sophia noticed a rider approaching Xavier Oakley, leading a packhorse laden with supplies. The children's reaction to his arrival was revealing. The younger ones waved excitedly, while several of the older boys straightened their postures, clearly impressed by the cowboy's presence. "Mr. Oakley," Sophia greeted him as he dismounted. "This is an unexpected surprise. Miss Grayson." He tipped his hat. "Brought some things for your school: books, slates, some paper. Ranch owner's wife heard you were setting up and wanted to contribute. That's extremely generous. Please convey my gratitude to Mrs. Sullivan, Elizabeth Sullivan. She was a teacher herself back in Pennsylvania before marrying the boss." Xavier began unloading the supplies. "How's your first day going?" "Quite well, actually." Sophia helped gather the books, conscious of the children watching their interaction with undisguised curiosity. "The children are spirited," Xavier chuckled. "That's one way to put it. James Wilcox giving you trouble yet?" "Nothing I can't handle," Sophia assured him, though she was surprised by his perceptiveness. How did you know? Been around here long enough to know which kids think rules don't apply to them. Xavier lowered his voice. His paws the same way, all bluster and no backbone. Stand your ground with James and he'll fall in line eventually. They carried the supplies inside, where Xavier helped arrange the new books on the shelves. The gesture was simple but touching, a small kindness in a town where Sophia still felt like an outsider. Thank you, Mr. Oakley. Not just for the supplies, but for... She hesitated, unsure how to express her gratitude without seeming overly familiar. For treating you like a person instead of a curiosity, he suggested quietly. Don't thank me for that, Miss Grayson. It's nothing more than you deserve. Their eyes met, and again, Sophia felt that strange connection, a recognition between two people who perhaps understood what it meant to be judged on appearances rather than character. The moment was broken by the school bell ringing outside, one of the students signaling the end of lunch period. Xavier stepped back, restoring the proper distance between them. I should get back to the ranch, he said. Good luck with your afternoon lessons. As he departed, Sophia couldn't help but notice the speculative glances from several mothers who had arrived to collect younger children for the lunch hour. Mrs. Wilkins, who had positioned herself near the schoolhouse ostensibly to ensure her young niece found her way back to class, narrowed her eyes thoughtfully. Xavier Oakley seems quite interested in our new schoolhouse, the older woman remarked. 2 visits in 3 days. Quite unusual for a man who typically avoids town except for necessary business. Mr. Oakley was merely delivering supplies donated by his employer's wife, Sophia replied evenly, unwilling to feed the woman's obvious fishing for gossip. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for the afternoon lessons. The remainder of the day passed without incident, though Sophia caught James Wilcox imitating her limp when he thought she wasn't looking. Rather than confront him directly, she assigned him to help the younger children with their letters, a task that kept him too occupied for mischief, while simultaneously giving him responsibility that appealed to his sense of importance. By the time she dismissed the children at 4 o'clock, Sophia was exhausted but satisfied. She had survived her first day, established her authority, and begun the process of gaining her students' respect, if not their affection. It was a start. As the days turned into weeks, Sophia settled into a routine. Her mornings and afternoons were dedicated to teaching, her evenings to grading assignments and preparing lessons. On Sundays, she attended church services and gradually became acquainted with more townspeople, though she remained conscious of a certain reserve in their manner toward her. Xavier Oakley remained a peripheral but constant presence in her new life. He rarely came to town, but when he did, he invariably found a reason to stop by the schoolhouse, sometimes bringing more books or supplies, other times offering to fix something that needed repair. Their conversations were brief, but increasingly comfortable, and Sophia found herself looking forward to his unexpected visits. One Friday afternoon in late September, as Sophia was writing the next week's lessons on the blackboard after dismissing her students, she heard the schoolhouse door open behind her. "Forgot something, did you?" she asked without turning, assuming it was one of her pupils. "Just my manners, perhaps," came Xavier's familiar voice. "Should have knocked." Sophia turned, unable to hide her pleased surprise. "Mr. Oakley, what brings you to town today? Cattle sale. Got a good price, too." He removed his hat, revealing hair that had been recently trimmed. "Also wanted to invite you to Silver Creek's Harvest Festival tomorrow. The ranch hosts it every year. Food, music, dancing. The whole town's invited, but I thought you might appreciate a personal invitation, being new and all." Sophia hesitated. She had heard about the festival from her students, but hadn't planned to attend. Large gatherings were difficult with her leg, particularly when dancing was involved, a painful reminder of activities she could no longer fully enjoy. "It's very kind of you to think of me, but I'm not sure. There'll be a wagon going from town," Xavier interrupted, seeming to understand her hesitation. "No need to worry about the ride. And there's plenty to do besides dancing, apple bobbing, horseshoe competitions, storytelling for the little ones." The eagerness in his expression was hard to resist. "Well, when you put it that way, I suppose it would be churlish to decline." His face broke into that rare, transformative smile. "Excellent. Wagon leaves from the Mercantile at 1 o'clock. I'll make sure they save you a comfortable spot." After he left, Sophia found herself unnecessarily flustered, smoothing her skirts and adjusting hairpins that weren't out of place. It wasn't as if Xavier had singled her out for special attention. He'd said himself that the whole town was invited. Yet there had been something in his manner, a warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, that suggested more than mere neighborly courtesy. "Don't be foolish, Sophia," she muttered to herself. "The man is being kind, nothing more." Saturday dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for a harvest festival. Sophia dressed with particular care in her best dress, a forest green poplin with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She even allowed herself a touch of rouge on her cheeks and lips, not enough to scandalize, but sufficient to bring some color to her pale complexion. The wagon was already half full when she arrived at the Mercantile. Mrs. Townsend waved her over, making space on the bench beside her. "Miss Grayson, I was hoping you'd join us. The Silver Creek Harvest Festival is not to be missed." The journey to the ranch took nearly an hour, during which Sophia learned more about Silver Creek and its owners, the Sullivans, than she had in the previous month. According to Mrs. Townsend, James Sullivan had come west after the war with little more than determination and a good head for business. Now his ranch was one of the most prosperous in the territory. "And Xavier Oakley?" Sophia found herself asking, trying to sound merely casually interested. "He seems well respected." Mrs. Townsend's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Xavier's been with Silver Creek almost from the beginning. Started as just another cowhand but worked his way up to foreman within 3 years. Man's got away with cattle and horses too. Some say he can gentle the wildest Mustang just by talking to it. He seems very capable, that he is, though there's some in town who haven't forgotten his past, or rather what they think they know about it." Mrs. Townsend lowered her voice. "There was some trouble when he first came to Nebraska City. A fight at the saloon, a man badly injured. Nothing was ever proven but mud sticks, especially in small towns." Before Sophia could inquire further, the wagon crested a hill, revealing Silver Creek Ranch spread out before them, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley beside a winding creek. The main house was an impressive 2-story structure with a wide porch, while numerous outbuildings, corrals, and barns dotted the surrounding land. A large meadow near the creek had been transformed into a festival ground, with tables laden with food, a wooden platform for musicians, and various games and activities set up throughout the area. As they approached, Sophia spotted Xavier directing some ranch hands who were setting up additional seating. He looked different here, more relaxed, more in his element than he ever appeared in town. When he caught sight of the wagon, he said something to one of the workers and strode toward them, arriving just as the driver brought the team to a halt. "Welcome to Silver Creek," he called, helping passengers disembark. When he reached Sophia, his hands were strong and sure as they spanned her waist, lifting her down with effortless care. "Miss Grayson, glad you could come. Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Oakley. Your ranch is beautiful." Not my ranch, he corrected with a smile. Just work here. But I'm proud of it all the same. He offered his arm. Would you like a tour before the festivities begin in earnest? Mrs. Sullivan asked me to bring you to the house if you arrived early enough. Conscious of Mrs. Townsend's knowing smile, Sophia placed her hand on Xavier's arm. I'd be delighted. As they walked toward the main house, Sophia was acutely aware of the contrast they presented: the tall, strong cowboy and the limping schoolteacher. Yet Xavier matched his pace perfectly to hers, never rushing, never making her feel that her slower gait was an inconvenience. The ranch house was as impressive inside as out, tastefully furnished with a mixture of sturdy frontier pieces and finer items that must have been shipped from back east at considerable expense. In the parlor, they found a slender woman in her 40s arranging flowers in a crystal vase. Elizabeth, Xavier called, Miss Grayson has arrived. Mrs. Sullivan turned with a warm smile. Miss Grayson, I'm so pleased you could join us. Xavier has mentioned you several times. Has he? Sophia glanced at Xavier, who suddenly seemed very interested in his boots. All good things, I assure you, Mrs. Sullivan continued. He tells me you've made quite an impression on your students, even James Wilcox, which is no small achievement. The children are responding well to structure and clear expectations, Sophia replied modestly. And the books you so generously donated have been invaluable. Thank you. They chatted for several minutes before Mrs. Sullivan excused herself to attend to other guests. Xavier led Sophia back outside, where the festival was now in full swing. Children raced about playing games, women compared preserves and needlework displayed on judging tables, and men gathered around the horseshoe pit, or the impromptu shooting range set up at a safe distance from the main activities. Hungry? Xavier asked, guiding Sophia toward the laden tables. Hank's been cooking for 3 days straight for this. They filled plates with fried chicken, corn bread, beans, and fresh apple pie, then found seats at a table under a large oak tree. As they ate, Sophia observed the interactions around them: the easy camaraderie of the ranch hands, the slightly more formal behavior of the townspeople, the uninhibited joy of the children. It was a community gathering in the truest sense, and for the first time since arriving in Nebraska City, Sophia felt a genuine connection to the place and its people. You're smiling, Xavier remarked. Suits you. Sophia felt a blush creep up her cheeks. It's a lovely festival. Everyone seems so happy. That's the magic of Silver Creek, he agreed, his gaze sweeping over the scene. Sullivan believes in treating his workers like family. Most of these men have been here for years. And you, will you stay at Silver Creek indefinitely? Xavier considered the question. Been saving to buy my own place someday. Small spread, nothing fancy, just something to call my own. That's a fine ambition. Sophia's admiration was genuine. To build something lasting. He studied her face. What about you, Miss Grayson? Is teaching in Nebraska City your final destination, or just a stop along the way? It was a question Sophia hadn't fully answered for herself. I'm not certain. I came here seeking independence, a place where I could be valued for my mind rather than pitied for my leg. I suppose I'll stay as long as I feel I'm making a difference. And are you making a difference? Sophia thought of her students. Even difficult James Wilcox was showing improvement, and little Sarah Miller had finally mastered her letters after weeks of struggle. I believe I am, yes. It's early days yet, but there's progress. Xavier nodded approvingly. Figured as much. You've got grit, Miss Grayson, more than most folks I've known. The musicians began tuning their instruments on the wooden platform: a fiddle, a guitar, a banjo, and a harmonica. People started clearing space for dancing, and Sophia felt the familiar pang of exclusion. She had loved dancing before her illness, had been quite accomplished at it according to her dance master in St. Louis. "Would you care to dance, Miss Grayson?" Xavier's question surprised her. I can't." "Not anymore." She gestured vaguely toward her leg. "I would only embarrass myself and you." "Nonsense." Xavier stood and offered his hand. "There are different ways to dance, trust me." Against her better judgment, Sophia placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her toward the edge of the dancing area. The musicians struck up a lively tune, and couples began to form sets for a Virginia reel. "We'll sit this one out," Xavier told her, finding a bench with a good view of the dancers. "Just watch for now." They observed as the dance progressed, Xavier occasionally leaning close to point out a particularly skillful couple or to make a humorous observation about some of the less coordinated dancers. His commentary was entertaining and helped ease Sophia's sense of being left out. After 2 lively numbers, the musicians shifted to a slower waltz. Xavier turned to Sophia, his expression serious. "This one we can manage if you're willing to try." Before she could protest, he was leading her to a quieter corner of the dance area, slightly removed from the other couples. "I'll support you," he promised quietly. "Just follow my lead and go at your own pace. No one's watching us." That wasn't entirely true. Sophia could feel curious glances from several directions, but the warmth in Xavier's blue eyes made her momentarily forget her self-consciousness. He placed one hand lightly at her waist, took her right hand in his left, and began to move in a simple, modified waltz step that accommodated her limited mobility. It wasn't graceful by conventional standards, but there was a different kind of grace in the way Xavier adjusted to her limitations without comment or pity. For a few precious minutes, Sophia felt almost normal again, not a damaged woman to be pitied, but simply a young lady enjoying a dance with a handsome gentleman. "See," Xavier murmured as they completed a slow turn. "You're dancing." Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to express the fullness of her gratitude for this small but significant gift. As the music ended, Sophia became aware of someone watching them intently. James Wilcox's father, Vernon. His expression a mixture of disapproval and malicious amusement as he leaned toward another man and said something that made both of them snicker. The moment of joy evaporated, replaced by the familiar sting of being the object of mockery. Xavier followed her gaze, his jaw tightening when he spotted Wilcox. "Ignore him," he advised, his hand still warm at Sophia's waist. "Vernon Wilcox's opinion isn't worth a hill of beans." "It's fine, Mr. Oakley. I'm accustomed to such reactions." Sophia stepped back, breaking their contact. "Perhaps I should rest for a while. My leg is tiring." She made her way back to the bench, acutely conscious of her pronounced limp after the unusual exertion of the dance. Xavier followed, his expression concerned. "I pushed too hard. I apologize." "No, please don't. It was wonderful to dance again, even in such a limited way." Sophia managed a smile. "I'm simply being practical. If I overdo it now, I'll pay for it tomorrow." Xavier sat beside her, maintaining a proper distance, yet somehow conveying a sense of protectiveness. They watched the dancing in companionable silence for a while before he spoke again. "Miss Grayson, Sophia, may I ask you something personal?" The use of her given name startled her, but she nodded cautiously. "Why do you let folks like Wilcox get under your skin? You're twice the person he is in every way that matters." Sophia sighed. "It's not so much that his opinion bothers me personally. It's what it represents, the constant reminder that many people will never see beyond my limp to the person beneath. And in a small town like Nebraska City, such attitudes can affect my ability to do my job effectively." You mean if enough parents decide a crippled woman can't teach their children properly, you could lose your position? There was no judgment in Xavier's tone, just a blunt assessment of the reality. Precisely. It wouldn't matter how well I teach or how much the children learn. Some people simply can't get past appearances. Xavier was quiet for a long moment. Know something about that myself, he finally said. Coming west after the war, folks had certain ideas about a young man with a southern accent. Didn't matter that I never fired a shot for the Confederacy, that I spent most of the war hiding in the hills to avoid conscription. People hear the accent, see the background, and make up their minds. It was the most Xavier had ever revealed about his past, and Sophia felt honored by his confidence. Is that why you prefer the ranch to town? Fewer judgments, partly. Cattle don't care where you're from or how you talk. They just want fair treatment and a steady hand. He smiled slightly. But I've made my peace with town, more or less. Some folks have come around, others never will. Can't waste energy worrying about the latter. A wise philosophy, Sophia agreed, though sometimes easier said than lived. True enough. Xavier stood as the musicians took a break. How about some lemonade? Hank makes it with real lemons, not just the extract. As he went to fetch their drinks, Sophia watched him move through the crowd confident, respected, at home in his environment. It struck her that, despite their very different circumstances, they shared a fundamental understanding of what it meant to be judged on external factors rather than true character. Perhaps that was the basis of the connection she felt with him, a recognition of a kindred spirit. The remainder of the afternoon passed pleasantly. Xavier introduced Sophia to more of the ranch hands and their families, and she found herself genuinely enjoying the simple camaraderie of the gathering. As twilight approached, lanterns were lit around the festival grounds, creating a magical atmosphere of golden light and lengthening shadows. Last wagon back to town leaves soon, Xavier informed her as they finished a second piece of Hank's apple pie. Unless you'd prefer to stay for the evening bonfire, I could drive you back later. The offer was tempting more time in Xavier's company, more of this feeling of belonging, but Sophia was conscious of appearances. An unmarried woman returning alone with a bachelor after dark would set tongues wagging in Nebraska City, regardless of how innocent the circumstances. I should probably return with the others, she said reluctantly. Sunday is a school night after all, and I have lessons to prepare. Xavier nodded, understanding without explanation. I'll walk you to the wagon. As they made their way across the festival grounds, Sophia was aware of curious glances from townspeople, some speculative, others disapproving. Vernon Wilcox and his cronies watched their passage with undisguised smirks, but Xavier's presence beside her made their judgment easier to bear. At the wagon, Xavier helped Sophia up to a seat, his hands lingering briefly at her waist. Thank you for coming today, he said, his voice pitched for her ears alone. Meant a lot to me. Before she could respond, he stepped back, allowing other passengers to board. As the wagon pulled away, Sophia turned to find him still watching, his tall figure outlined against the lantern-lit festivities behind him. She raised her hand in farewell, and he touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. The journey back to town was filled with cheerful conversation as passengers discussed their favorite aspects of the festival. Sophia participated minimally, her thoughts occupied with the events of the day, particularly that brief waltz with Xavier, and the unexpected joy it had brought her. Mr. Oakley seemed quite attentive today, Mrs. Townsend remarked quietly, her tone neutral but her eyes shrewd. I haven't seen him dance with anyone at these gatherings before. He was simply being kind to a newcomer, Sophia replied, striving for a casual tone. making me feel welcome." Mrs. Townsend made a noncommittal sound. "Xavier Oakley is many things, but simply kind isn't one of them. The man doesn't do anything without purpose." She patted Sophia's hand. "Just be careful, dear. Small towns have long memories, and Xavier's past is complicated." It was the second time someone had alluded to Xavier's history without providing specifics. Sophia's curiosity was piqued, but she knew better than to press for gossip. If Xavier chose to share his past with her, that would be his decision. Back in her room above the millinery, Sophia removed her dancing slippers with a wince. Her leg ached from the unaccustomed activity, but it was a pain she accepted gladly in exchange for the memory of those moments in Xavier's arms. As she prepared for bed, she found herself humming the waltz they had danced to, a smile playing on her lips despite her attempts to temper her growing feelings for the Silver Creek foreman. The following weeks brought increasing challenges at school as the weather turned colder, and the children grew restless with the approach of winter. James Wilcox, after showing initial improvement, had reverted to disruptive behavior, often encouraging younger boys to join in his mischief. Sophia suspected his father's influence. Vernon Wilcox had made no secret of his opinion that a crippled woman had no business teaching the town's children. Xavier's visits to town became more frequent as Silver Creek prepared for winter, bringing cattle down from summer pastures and laying in supplies. He invariably found reasons to stop by the schoolhouse, sometimes after hours, sometimes during the lunch break when the children were playing outside. His visits were brief, but increasingly significant to Sophia. Bright spots in days often filled with the struggle to maintain authority and advance her students' education, despite growing opposition from certain parents. One particularly cold November afternoon, as Sophia was dismissing her students, she spotted Vernon Wilcox waiting outside with several other men, including Billy Parker's father and 2 members of the town council. Their expressions were uniformly grim, and Sophia braced herself for confrontation. "Miss Grayson," Wilcox began without preamble once the last child had departed, "we need to discuss your position here." "My position?" Sophia kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I wasn't aware it was in question, Mr. Wilcox. The school board hired me for the full term." "That may be, but circumstances change." Wilcox glanced at his companions for support. "Several parents have expressed concerns about your methods and your ability to maintain proper discipline." "I see." Sophia straightened her shoulders. "And what specific complaints do you have about my teaching, Mr. Wilcox?" The man shifted uncomfortably. "It's not so much the teaching itself. It's more a question of physical capacity. A schoolteacher needs to be able to move quickly, to oversee playground activities, to intervene in altercations. Your condition makes that difficult." "My condition, as you put it, has not prevented me from fulfilling any aspect of my duties," Sophia replied, her voice chilly. "In fact, the children's progress this term has been substantial. I would be happy to demonstrate their achievements at the winter exhibition next month." "That's all well and good, but I believe Miss Grayson has answered your concerns adequately, Wilcox." The new voice came from behind the group of men who turned to find Xavier Oakley approaching, leading his horse. "The children are learning, which is the point of a school, last I checked." Wilcox's face darkened. "This doesn't concern you, Oakley. It's town business." "Education concerns everyone," Xavier countered mildly. "And since Silver Creek pays a fair portion of the county taxes that fund this school, I'd say Mr. Sullivan has an interest in how it's run. He sent me to invite Miss Grayson to dinner this evening to discuss additional support for her teaching programs. He and Mrs. Sullivan are quite impressed with the progress she's making." The mention of James Sullivan, one of the most influential men in the county, caused a visible shift in the group's demeanor. Council member Peterson cleared his throat. "Well, we were merely conveying some parental concerns, not suggesting any immediate action. Perhaps we can revisit the matter after the winter exhibition, as Miss Grayson suggested." "A sensible approach," Xavier agreed with deceptive pleasantness. "Now, if you'll excuse us, gentlemen, Miss Grayson has an appointment to keep, and I've been instructed not to return to the ranch without her." The men dispersed, Wilcox throwing a venomous glance at Xavier as he departed. Once they were alone, Sophia leaned against the schoolhouse door, suddenly weak with relief. "Thank you," she said softly, "though I fear you may have only postponed the inevitable." Xavier tied his horse to the hitching post and approached her. "Nothing's inevitable except death and taxes, Miss Grayson. And I wasn't lying about the dinner invitation Elizabeth sent me to fetch you, though it was supposed to be a pleasant surprise, not a rescue mission. Either way, I'm grateful." Sophia managed a smile. "I should get my coat and lock up. Take your time, I'll wait here." Inside the schoolhouse, Sophia took a moment to collect herself, fighting back tears of frustration and fear. She had known opposition might come, but the reality of it, the naked prejudice behind Wilcox's complaints, was still painful. And now, Xavier had placed himself squarely on her side, potentially making himself a target of the same prejudice. It was both touching and concerning. When she emerged, composed once more, Xavier helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her. The arrangement was scandalously intimate by Nebraska City standards. Sophia could feel the solid warmth of his chest against her back, his arms encircling her as he handled the reins, but at that moment, she couldn't bring herself to care about propriety. "You don't have to fight my battles, Mr. Oakley," she said as they rode out of town. "I'm accustomed to standing up for myself." "Never doubted that for a minute," he replied, his breath warm against her ear. "But everyone needs allies sometimes, even stubborn, independent schoolteachers." Despite her anxiety about the confrontation with Wilcox and the others, Sophia found herself enjoying the ride to Silver Creek. The afternoon was clear and cold, the setting sun painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber. Xavier kept the horse at an easy pace, and they talked of inconsequential things: the approaching winter, the antics of her students, the new foals expected at the ranch in spring. Elizabeth Sullivan greeted them warmly upon their arrival, ushering Sophia into the parlor where a cheerful fire burned in the hearth. James Sullivan, a tall, distinguished man with silver-streaked dark hair and keen gray eyes, rose to welcome her. "Miss Grayson, a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard much about you from Xavier and my wife." His handshake was firm, his manner direct but friendly. "I understand some of our townsmen were giving you trouble today." Sophia glanced at Xavier, who shrugged unapologetically. "I sent word ahead. Sullivan should know what's brewing." "It's nothing I can't handle," Sophia assured them, though her voice lacked conviction. "Some parents have concerns about my physical limitations." "Rubbish," Elizabeth Sullivan declared firmly. "From what I hear, you're the best teacher that school has seen in years. The children are actually learning something beyond basic figures and letters." "My wife is right," Sullivan agreed, "and we intend to make our support known. The winter exhibition will be the perfect opportunity to demonstrate the children's progress under your guidance. We'll make sure every influential family in the county attends." Their confidence was heartening, but Sophia remained realistic. "I appreciate your support, truly, but if enough parents object to my presence, then we'll find another solution," Xavier interjected. "There are other schools, other towns, but it won't come to that. Not if we stand together." The dinner that followed was delightful, excellent food, stimulating conversation, and a sense of genuine warmth that made Sophia feel truly welcome. The Sullivans treated her as an intellectual equal, soliciting her opinions on everything from literature to politics. Xavier, while less talkative than his employers, watched her with evident pride as she held her own in the discussions. As the evening drew to a close, Xavier offered to drive Sophia back to town in the Sullivans' buggy. The night was clear and cold, stars spangling the vast Nebraska sky. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, wrapped in warm blankets against the chill. "Thank you," Sophia said finally. "Not just for today, but for seeing me. The real me, not just the limp." Xavier glanced at her, his expression serious in the starlight. "From the first moment I saw you, Sophia Grayson, I never saw anything but a remarkable woman with more courage than most men I've known." The use of her full name, spoken with such quiet conviction, sent a shiver through Sophia that had nothing to do with the cold. "You barely knew me then." "Knew enough." He adjusted the reins, his shoulder brushing hers. "Some things a man just recognizes." They were approaching the outskirts of town, and Sophia felt a sudden reluctance to have the evening end. These moments with Xavier away from curious eyes and judgmental whispers had become precious to her, an oasis of acceptance in a world that too often defined her by her limitations. "Xavier," she began hesitantly, using his given name for the first time, "may I ask what happened when you first came to Nebraska City?" Mrs. Townsend mentioned some trouble. He was silent for so long that Sophia feared she had overstepped. Then, with a sigh, he began to speak. "Came here in '68. Just a kid, really. 17, skinny as a rail, with nothing but the clothes on my back and a horse that was more bones than muscle. Found work at Silver Creek mucking stalls, learned the cattle business from the ground up. Sullivan saw something in me, started giving me more responsibility." He paused, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. "There was a man in town, Harlan Drake. Mean drunk, used to beat his wife something terrible. One night at the saloon he was bragging about it, saying how he'd taught her a lesson for burning his supper. I told him to shut his mouth. Words were exchanged. He drew on me." "You shot him?" Sophia asked quietly. Xavier shook his head. "Never even pulled my gun. Beat him with my fists until 2 men pulled me off. Nearly killed him with my bare hands." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Not proud of it, but can't say I regret it either. Man deserved worse than what he got." "What happened afterward?" "Drake left town as soon as he could ride. His wife went with him, too afraid to stay without him, I guess. Some folks in town thought I should be run out too, said I was too dangerous to keep around. Sullivan stood by me, said if I went, so did Silver Creek's business. Town council decided maybe I wasn't so bad after all." A hint of bitterness crept into his tone. "But some, like Wilcox, never forgot, never forgave either. And that's why there's tension between you and some of the townspeople," Sophia concluded. "Not because of what you did, but because you challenged their authority." Xavier glanced at her with surprise. "That's exactly it. How did you know? People like Vernon Wilcox don't really care about justice or right and wrong. They care about maintaining their position, their sense of importance." Sophia's voice was quiet but firm. "I've encountered plenty of his kind before." They had reached the millinery shop. Xavier brought the buggy to a stop and set the brake before turning to face Sophia. "You're an extraordinary woman, Sophia Grayson," he said softly. "Brave and smart and kinder than most folks deserve. Don't let men like Wilcox make you doubt yourself for a second." The emotion in his voice made Sophia's heart beat faster. Their faces were very close in the darkness of the buggy, and for a breathless moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, He reached up to gently tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingertips lingering against her cheek. "Better get you inside before Mrs. Wilkins sends out a search party," he murmured. "Woman watches that window like a hawk." Sure enough, a shadow moved behind the curtains of the millinery shop's front window. Xavier climbed down and came around to help Sophia descend from the buggy. At her door, he removed his hat, his expression suddenly uncertain. "Sophia, would it be forward of me to call on you properly sometime? Not just stopping by the schoolhouse, but a real call. Sunday afternoon, maybe." The request, so formal, so endearingly proper, brought a smile to Sophia's lips. "I would like that very much, Xavier." His answering smile was like sunrise after a long night. "Sunday at 2, then. Good night, Miss Grayson. Good night, Mr. Oakley." As Sophia prepared for bed that night, her mind swirled with the events of the day, the confrontation with Wilcox and his allies, the unexpected support from the Sullivans, and most significantly, Xavier's request to call on her officially. That last development filled her with both joy and trepidation. If Xavier began courting her openly, it would only increase the opposition from men like Wilcox, potentially making her position in the community even more precarious. Yet the thought of discouraging Xavier's attentions was painful. In the 2 months since her arrival in Nebraska City, he had become more than just an ally. He was a friend, a confidant, and increasingly, someone whose presence made her heart beat faster and her spirits lift. The possibility that he might share those deeper feelings was both thrilling and terrifying. The next few days passed in a blur of teaching, grading, and preparation for the winter exhibition, which had taken on new significance as a potential turning point in her battle for acceptance. Sophia threw herself into readying her students, determined that their performance would silence even her harshest critics. On Sunday afternoon, precisely at 2 o'clock, Xavier arrived at the millinery shop. He wore his best clothes, clean denims, a pressed white shirt, and a leather vest that had been polished to a rich sheen. His hair was neatly combed, and he carried a small bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers. "Mrs. Wilkins" answered his knock, her expression a mixture of disapproval and resignation, as she showed him into the small parlor where Sophia waited. Despite having seen Xavier numerous times before, Sophia found herself suddenly shy, overly conscious of her simple blue Sunday dress and carefully arranged hair. "Miss Grayson," Xavier greeted her with formal correctness, though his eyes held a warmth that was anything but formal. "Thank you for receiving me, Mr. Oakley." Sophia accepted the wildflowers with a smile. "These are lovely. Please, won't you sit down?" Mrs. Wilkins hovered in the doorway. "I'll just put these in water, Miss Grayson, and then perhaps some tea." "Thank you, Mrs. Wilkins. Tea would be nice." Once the landlady had reluctantly departed, leaving the door conspicuously ajar, Xavier relaxed slightly, his posture becoming less rigid. "You look beautiful today," he said quietly, "though you always do." Sophia felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself. I almost didn't recognize you without dust on your hat." He chuckled, the sound rich and pleasant in the small room. "Figured I should make an effort for a proper call, though I feel like a prize bull being shown at auction in these stiff clothes." Their conversation flowed easily, touching on the upcoming winter exhibition, life at Silver Creek, and books they had both enjoyed. Xavier revealed an unexpected love of poetry, "my mother's influence," he explained, and Sophia found herself reciting verses she had memorized during her convalescence after the fever. Mrs. Wilkins served tea with thin lemon cookies, her disapproving presence a constant reminder of propriety. When Xavier finally rose to leave after an hour of carefully chaperoned conversation, Sophia felt a mixture of disappointment and relief. The visit had been pleasant but constrained by convention and Mrs. Wilkins's watchful eye. At the door, Xavier took Sophia's hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "May I call again next Sunday?" "I would like that," Sophia replied, conscious of Mrs. Wilkins pretending to dust a nearby table. "Perhaps we might walk to the church picnic together, if the weather permits." "I'd be honored." He hesitated, then lifted her hand and pressed a brief, proper kiss to her knuckles. "Until then, Miss Grayson." The gesture, though entirely within the bounds of propriety, sent a flutter through Sophia's chest. "Until then, Mr. Oakley." After he departed, Mrs. Wilkins made no attempt to hide her disapproval. "Well, Miss Grayson, I see you've decided to encourage Mr. Oakley's attentions, despite my warnings about his reputation." Sophia met the older woman's gaze steadily. "Mr. Oakley has been nothing but respectful and kind to me, Mrs. Wilkins. I judge people by their actions toward me, not by rumors or ancient history." "Very noble, I'm sure," Mrs. Wilkins sniffed. "Just don't come crying to me when the town council decides a schoolteacher who keeps company with a man of violence isn't suitable for impressionable children." The warning stung, but Sophia refused to show it. "Thank you for serving tea, Mrs. Wilkins. It was most appreciated." In the days that followed, Sophia noticed a subtle shift in the town's attitude toward her. Some people who had previously been cordial became coolly distant, while others made a point of being especially friendly. The division was clear: those who disapproved of her association with Xavier Oakley, and those who supported it, or at least didn't object. The children, thankfully, seemed largely unaffected by adult politics. They continued to progress in their studies, and even James Wilcox, despite occasional backsliding, showed improvement in both behavior and academic performance. Sophia poured her energy into preparing them for the exhibition, scheduling extra practice sessions and selecting pieces that would showcase each child's particular strengths. Xavier continued to visit the schoolhouse occasionally, though always with legitimate reasons, delivering more books from Mrs. Sullivan, fixing the stove pipe before the first real cold snap, reinforcing shelves that threatened to collapse under the weight of new supplies. His presence was both a comfort and a complication, offering support while simultaneously fueling the town's gossip. Their second Sunday visit was even more pleasant than the first, despite the continued chaperonage of Mrs. Wilkins. The weather proved too cold and wet for the church picnic, so they spent another hour in the millinery's parlor, this time with Xavier bringing a book of Tennyson's poems to read aloud. His deep voice gave life to the verses, and Sophia found herself captivated not just by the poetry, but by the man himself, his intelligence, his sensitivity, the glimpses of depth beneath his reserved exterior. As the winter exhibition approached, tensions in town increased. Wilcox and his allies made no secret of their continued opposition to Sophia, while the Sullivans and their supporters countered with equally public endorsements of her teaching methods. The exhibition became a symbolic battleground, with both sides investing it with significance beyond a simple display of student achievement. The night before the event, a heavy snow began to fall. By morning, Nebraska City was blanketed in white, the roads nearly impassable. Sophia stood at her window, watching the snowflakes swirl in the gray dawn light, fear gripping her heart. If families couldn't reach the schoolhouse, if attendance was poor due to weather rather than merit, her opponents would seize upon it as further evidence of her inadequacy. A knock at her door interrupted her worried thoughts. Mrs. Wilkins entered without waiting for a response, her expression unusually animated. "You'll want to look out your front window, Miss Grayson. Quite a sight." Puzzled, Sophia moved to the window overlooking the main street. What she saw made her gasp in surprise. A line of wagons and sleighs was making its way through town, each vehicle filled with families bundled against the cold. At the head of the procession rode Xavier Oakley, leading the way on his chestnut gelding. "Seems Mr. Oakley and the Sullivan hands have been busy since dawn," Mrs. Wilkins remarked, a reluctant note of admiration in her voice. "Clearing paths to outlying farms, helping folks get to town. Not a family with school-age children will miss your exhibition today." Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes. Without a word to her landlady, she hurried to dress, choosing her best navy blue dress with its lace collar, the one she'd worn on her first day of teaching. By the time she reached the schoolhouse, it was already filling with families stomping snow from their boots and unwrapping layers of scarves and coats. Xavier met her at the door, his cheeks ruddy from cold, snowflakes melting in his dark hair. "Morning, Miss Grayson. Looks like you'll have a full house today." "I don't know how to thank you," Sophia whispered, overwhelmed by the effort he had made on her behalf. "This is extraordinary. Wasn't just me. Whole ranch turned out to help." His eyes held hers, warm despite the chill. "Some things are worth fighting for, Sophia." The exhibition exceeded even Sophia's highest hopes. Her students performed brilliantly, reciting poetry, demonstrating mathematical problems, presenting history lessons, and displaying their improved penmanship. Even James Wilcox, to his father's evident shock, delivered a flawless recitation of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, his usual rebellious attitude replaced by genuine pride in his accomplishment. As the presentations concluded, Mr. Peterson stepped forward to address the assembled parents and community members. "I believe I speak for the entire school board when I say that the progress demonstrated by our students today is remarkable. Miss Grayson has clearly had a most positive influence on their education." His words were met with enthusiastic applause from most of the audience, though Vernon Wilcox and a few others remained stony-faced. Sophia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The exhibition had been a success, her methods vindicated by the children's performance. Whatever opposition remained would be difficult to maintain in the face of such clear evidence of her effectiveness as a teacher. After the formal presentations, the gathering transformed into an impromptu social event, with parents enjoying coffee and cake provided by several of the mothers while discussing their children's performances. Sophia moved among them, accepting congratulations and answering questions about her teaching methods. She was explaining her approach to mathematics to an interested father when she became aware of raised voices near the schoolhouse door. Vernon Wilcox, his face flushed with anger or drink or both, was confronting Xavier. "You think you're so clever, don't you, Oakley, bringing the whole county to see the cripple's little show? Well, it doesn't change facts. She's still not fit to teach our children, and you're still the same violent criminal who nearly killed a man with your bare hands." Xavier's expression remained impassive, though Sophia could see the tension in his shoulders. "Exhibition speaks for itself, Wilcox. The children are learning. That's what matters. What matters is that you've set your sights on her, and we all know why." Wilcox's voice was loud enough to draw attention from nearby parents. "A cripple with no prospects is about the best a man like you can hope for. Damaged goods for damaged goods." A hush fell over the room as people registered Wilcox's cruel words. Sophia felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, but before she could move or speak, James Wilcox stepped forward from the group of children watching the confrontation. "That's not true, Pa," the boy said, his voice clear in the sudden silence. "Miss Grayson's the best teacher we've ever had. She doesn't yell or hit us like old Mr. Foster did. She explains things so we understand, and she's patient even when we're being difficult." And she's not a cripple, she just walks different. She told us her leg got hurt from being real sick, and that it takes more courage to keep going when things are hard. The simple defense, coming from the most unexpected source, brought fresh tears to Sophia's eyes. Vernon Wilcox stared at his son in shocked anger, but before he could respond, other children joined in. "Miss Grayson helped me learn to read when everyone said I was too stupid," little Tommy Parker declared. "She knows more history than anybody," added Sarah Miller. "And she makes it interesting instead of just dates to memorize." One by one, the children voiced their support, their honest affection for their teacher evident in every word. Their parents listened, many nodding in agreement, some looking ashamed of their previous doubts. Vernon Wilcox, finding himself suddenly without allies, backed toward the door. "Come along, James. We're leaving." To everyone's surprise, James stood his ground. "No, Pa, I want to stay for the rest of the party. Miss Grayson said there'd be prizes for the best presentations." For a moment, it seemed Vernon might create a scene, but a warning look from Xavier and the weight of public opinion clearly visible in the faces around him made him reconsider. With a final glare at Sophia and Xavier, he stormed out into the snowy afternoon. The incident broke the tension in the room, and the celebration resumed with renewed energy. Sophia found herself surrounded by parents expressing support and appreciation, many apologizing for having harbored doubts about her abilities. The transformation was remarkable in the space of a few hours. She had gone from being tolerated to being celebrated. As the event wound down and families began to depart, Xavier approached Sophia, his expression one of quiet pride. "Told you it would work out." "You did," she acknowledged with a smile. "Though I admit I had my doubts, especially when Mr. Wilcox began his tirade." Xavier's expression darkened momentarily. "Man's a fool, always has been. Perhaps, but his son isn't." Sophia glanced at James Wilcox, who was helping younger children gather their coats and scarves. "There's hope there, I think. Because of you." Xavier's voice was soft but intense. "You saw something in him worth nurturing, just like you do with all of them. It's a gift, Sophia." The schoolhouse had nearly emptied, just a few parents and children remaining as they bundled up against the cold. Mrs. Sullivan approached, her expression warm. "Miss Grayson, that was truly remarkable. Those children adore you, and with good reason." She glanced between Sophia and Xavier, a knowing smile touching her lips. "Xavier, why don't you see Miss Grayson safely home? James and I are taking the last few families in our sleigh." It was a transparent attempt to give them time alone, but Sophia was too happy to object. Once the last of the guests had departed, she and Xavier worked together to straighten the schoolroom, returning desks to their usual positions and collecting forgotten gloves and scarves. "I still can't believe you organized that procession this morning," Sophia said as she wiped the blackboard clean. "You must have been up before dawn." 4 o'clock, Xavier confirmed, but it was worth it to see the look on Wilcox's face when every family in the county showed up. Sophia laughed a free, joyous sound that echoed in the empty schoolhouse. "It was rather satisfying, wasn't it? Though I feel a bit sorry for James, caught between his father and his own sense of right. Boy's got courage, like his teacher." Xavier set the last desk in place and turned to face her. "Sophia, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." The seriousness in his tone made Sophia's heart skip. "Yes. These past months, getting to know you, seeing your strength and your kindness, it's been the best time of my life." He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know it's soon, and I know there would be challenges, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just friendship or admiration. It's more, much more." Sophia could hardly breathe, hardly believe what she was hearing. "Xavier, I'm not asking for promises yet," he continued hastily. "Just permission to court you properly, to see if what I feel, what I hope you might feel too, could grow into something lasting." The moment stretched between them, fraught with possibility. Sophia thought of all the reasons to be cautious: the town's gossip, the potential impact on her position, the practical difficulties her condition presented. But outweighing all of those considerations was the simple truth that had been growing in her heart since that day he had defended her on the street. She was falling in love with Xavier Oakley. "Yes," she said finally, her voice soft but certain. "I would like that very much." The smile that illuminated his face was worth any risk, any challenge that might lie ahead. Xavier took her hand, his touch gentle yet sure. "May I kiss you, Sophia Grayson? I've been wanting to since the first time I saw you stumble on Townsend's doorstep." In answer, Sophia rose on tiptoe, balancing herself with one hand on his shoulder, and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was sweet and tentative at first, then deepened as Xavier's arms encircled her, supporting her weight so that for once her leg was not a consideration, not a limitation, but simply part of the woman he was holding, as if she were precious beyond measure. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "Reckon we just scandalized the entire town." Sophia laughed softly. "Only if someone was watching through the window, and at this point I'm not sure I care." The winter months that followed were the happiest of Sophia's life. Xavier courted her openly and properly, taking her to church socials, escorting her on sleigh rides when the weather permitted, and spending Sunday afternoons in Mrs. Wilkins's parlor, gradually winning over even that stern lady with his respectful manner and evident devotion to Sophia. The town's attitude continued to evolve. Most people accepted their relationship with good grace, some even expressing approval of the match. Vernon Wilcox and a few die-hards maintained their opposition, but they found themselves increasingly isolated as Sophia's position in the community strengthened. Her students continued to thrive, and by spring, even the most skeptical parents had to admit that the limping schoolteacher from St. Louis had brought new life and higher standards to Nebraska City School. As for James Wilcox, the boy blossomed under Sophia's guidance, revealing an aptitude for mathematics and a newfound respect for education that defied his father's influence. Though Vernon continued to grumble, he no longer actively opposed Sophia, perhaps recognizing that to do so would alienate him further from his increasingly independent son. On a mild evening in early April, Xavier took Sophia for a drive along the creek that gave Silver Creek Ranch its name. The willows were just beginning to green, and wildflowers dotted the awakening prairie with splashes of color. They stopped at a particularly beautiful spot where the creek widened into a small pool, reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "I wanted to show you something," Xavier said, helping Sophia down from the buggy with the practiced ease they had developed. He supported her as they walked to the edge of a small rise overlooking the water and the rolling land beyond. "See that patch of land there with the cottonwoods?" "The flat area just beyond the bend in the creek," Sophia nodded, admiring the picturesque setting. "It's mine. Bought it from Sullivan last week, 20 acres with water rights and good soil." Xavier's voice held barely contained excitement. "Going to build a house there this summer. Nothing fancy at first, just 2 rooms and a porch, but designed so it can be added to later as needed." "Xavier, that's wonderful." Sophia squeezed his arm, genuinely happy for him. "Your own land at last." "Our land," he corrected softly, turning to face her, "if you want it to be." For a moment, Sophia couldn't comprehend his meaning. Then understanding dawned, bringing with it a wave of emotion so powerful she had to grip his arms for support. "Sophia Grayson," Xavier said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I love you. Not despite your limp, but with it, because it's part of what made you the woman you are, the woman I want to spend my life with. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Sophia's vision as joy washed through her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Xavier Oakley, I will marry you." He gathered her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in his exuberance, spinning them both in a circle that made Sophia laugh with delighted surprise. When he set her down again, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "Belonged to my grandmother," he explained as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small pearl. "Not fancy, but it's been in the family for generations. It's perfect," Sophia assured him as he slipped it onto her finger. "Absolutely perfect." They were married in June, with the Sullivans hosting the celebration at Silver Creek Ranch. The entire town attended, even Vernon Wilcox, who had gradually moderated his opposition as his son's academic achievements under Sophia's tutelage became impossible to ignore. Mrs. Wilkins wept openly during the ceremony, her earlier disapproval long since transformed into grudging admiration for the couple's steadfast devotion. Sophia wore a cream-colored dress that Elizabeth Sullivan had helped her select on a shopping trip to Omaha, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers gathered from the land where their home was even then being built. Xavier, resplendent in a new suit, couldn't take his eyes off his bride as she walked toward him with only the slightest hint of her characteristic limp. They mocked her for her limp. James Wilcox was overheard telling a group of younger children as the newlyweds shared their first dance. But Mr. Oakley said she walked through more than they ever would, and he was right. Look at them now. The couple honeymooned in St. Louis, where Sophia introduced Xavier to her aunt and the few friends who had stood by her after her illness. They returned to Nebraska City in July, moving into their new home just as the wheat fields were turning golden around them. The house was simple but solid, with wide doorways that made it easier for Sophia to move about on days when her leg pained her more than usual, and a covered porch where they spent summer evenings watching the sunset over their land. Sophia continued teaching, traveling to and from town each day in the buggy Xavier had given her as a wedding present. In time, she became one of the most respected figures in the community, known not just for her educational standards, but for her compassion and determination to see the best in every child who passed through her classroom. Xavier's small farm prospered alongside his continued work as Silver Creek's foreman. He raised horses primarily, developing a reputation for gentle training methods that produced exceptionally reliable mounts. In time, Oakley horses became sought after throughout the territory, providing the couple with a comfortable living. Their first child, a boy they named William James, arrived the following spring, a robust infant with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth Ann, whose first steps coincided with the completion of the additions to their house that transformed it from a simple dwelling into a true family home. As the children grew, Sophia's limp became less pronounced, partly due to Xavier's insistence on consulting a specialist in Omaha, who suggested exercises and treatments to strengthen her leg, partly due to her own determination to keep up with her active family. She would never walk without that distinctive gait, but it ceased to define her in the eyes of the community. Instead, she was known as the dedicated teacher, the loving wife and mother, the woman whose quiet strength had transformed not just her own life, but the lives of countless students who passed through her classroom. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Xavier surprised Sophia with a special gift, a rocking chair built to his specifications, designed to provide proper support for her leg while allowing her to rock their children, and eventually their grandchildren, to sleep. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, William and Elizabeth playing with their dog in the yard, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. "You ever wonder," she asked Xavier, "what would have happened if I'd never come to Nebraska City? If I'd let my aunt convince me that I was too fragile for the frontier?" Xavier took her hand, his fingers caressing the wedding band that had not left her finger in a decade. "I think some things are meant to be one way or another. If not Nebraska City, we'd have found each other somewhere else." "Such a romantic," Sophia teased, leaning against his shoulder. "The tough cowboy with a poet's heart." "Only for you, Mrs. Oakley," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Only ever for you." As twilight deepened into night, stars appearing one by one in the vast Nebraska sky, Sophia Grayson Oakley offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the courage that had brought her west, for the man who had seen beyond her limp to the woman beneath, and for the life they had built together, a life defined not by limitations, but by love.